Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So we're reading from Bhagavatam, and we're preparing for going to Sri Maya portion. So hopefully we'll be doing some readings, if not every day, at least a majority of days while we're there in the Dham. And we'll also be in Calcutta for a little while, so like that. But let us read now. Where are we?
It's Canto 3, Chapter 32, Text 27.
What's the chapter title?
Huh?
Chapter title?
Entanglement in fruitive activities.
Don't we know it, brothers and sisters? Don't we know it?
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Well done. The greatest common understanding for all yogis is complete detachment from matter, which can be achieved by different kinds of yoga. Purport. There are three kinds of yoga, namely Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga and Ashtanga Yoga. Devotees, Jnanis and Yogis all try to get out of the material entanglement. The Jnanis try to detach their sensual activities from material engagement. The Jnana Yogi thinks that matter is false and that Brahman is truth. He tries therefore by cultivation of knowledge to detach the senses from material enjoyment. The Ashtanga Yogis also try to control the senses. The devotees, however, try to engage the senses in the service of the Lord. Therefore, it appears that the activities of the bhaktas, devotees, are better than those of the Jnanis and Yogis. The mystic yogis simply try to control the senses by practicing the 8 divisions of yoga: yama, niyama, asana, pranayama and pratyahara, etc. And the Jnanis try by mental reasoning to understand that sense enjoyment is false. But the easiest and most direct process is to engage the senses in the service of the Lord. It's interesting because it's Bhakti Yoga in that sense is so easy to engage in, as opposed to, like as Prabhupada explains, controlling or shutting off the senses or forcing the mind to think of something. But with Bhakti Yoga, you can, whatever your skills are, whatever you're able to do, you just engage that in Krishna's service, whether it's coming to the temple and saying, I like to type, I like to paint, I can clean, I'm a singer, and without thinking of anything external, like you don't have to focus even, because you come under the spiritual energy that it just acts. The results of that yoga just act on you, whereas the other ones are dependent on your focus. If you don't focus the mind in that way that the Jnanis or the Ashtanga Yoga, if you don't close off the senses and do the breathing correctly, one through this nostril and that one, close the eyes in a certain way, it doesn't give you the result of that path. But with Bhakti Yoga, you can just step into it. It's like stepping into a swimming pool. You can just put your toe or your foot into it and you're wet. So in the same way, you can just, you may not even be aware you're stepping into it, if that makes sense. And you can engage people in service when you're out on Harinam or Book Distribution or something, and they don't even realize they're coming under the devi energy, the spiritual energy. So I think it's a very powerful form of connecting with the Lord, and very easy and the most simplest way to do it.
That's very powerful realization, actually. Very, very nice, yeah. Never quite thought about it exactly like that. It's very, very powerful. Thank you.
Next paragraph.
Oh, yeah. The purpose of all yoga is to detach one's sense activities from this material world. The final aims, however, are different. Jnanis want to become one with the Brahman effulgence. Yogis want to realize Paramatma, and devotees want to develop Krishna consciousness and transcendental loving service to the Lord. That loving service is the perfect stage of sense control. The senses are actually active symptoms of life, and they cannot be stopped. Very important point. They can be detached only if there is superior engagement. As it is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Param Drishtva Navartate, the activities of the senses can be stopped if they are given superior engagements. The supreme engagement is engagement of the senses in the service of the Lord. That is the purpose of all yoga. Yeah. So there you go. The purpose of all yoga is simply to engage the senses in the service of the Lord. That's, I mean, whether it's the Jnanis or whether it's the Astanga yogis, the mystic yogis, I think Prabhupada said earlier, then ultimately controlling the senses, or their ultimate destination, will be to engage in the service of the Lord. So, yeah, Param Drishtva Navartate. We have to find a higher taste. When we get the higher taste, when we experience something higher, we no longer yearn for or crave for the lower taste. Although, as I think it's that verse that's quoted from the Gita, Param Drishtva Navartate, Niraharasya, God, I can't remember now. But anyway, although one may be detached from material engagement, one still has a taste for those things. So even if you're controlling the senses, still something might be lurking. We really have to get that Param Drishtva, that higher taste. Then it goes. But even then it can come back if we're not careful, because as Prabhupada said, devotional life, devotional service, bhakti is like a razor's edge, so we have to be very careful.
Alright, text 28. Those who are averse to the transcendence realize the supreme absolute truth differently through speculative sense perception, and therefore, because of mistaken speculation, everything appears to them to be relative. Prabhupada. The supreme absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, is one, and he is spread everywhere by his impersonal feature. This is clearly expressed in Bhagavad Gita. Lord Krishna says, everything that is experienced is but an expansion of my energy. Everything is sustained by him, but that does not mean that he is in everything. Sense perceptions, such as oral perception of the sound of a drum, visual perception of a beautiful woman, or perception of the delicious taste of a milk preparation by the tongue, all come through different senses and are therefore differently understood. Therefore, sensory knowledge is divided in different categories. Although actually everything is one as a manifestation of the energy of the Supreme Lord. Similarly, the energies of fire are heat and illumination. And by these two energies, fire can display itself in many varieties or in diversified sense perception. Mayavadi philosophers declare this diversity to be false. But Vaishnava philosophers do not accept the different manifestations as false. They accept them as non-different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead because they are a display of his diverse energies. And also, I guess, I don't know if Prabhupada will go on to say it, but not only do Vaishnava philosophers accept, okay, this is another form or manifestation of the Lord, but like it's not false, but it's temporary, the material manifestation.
It's real because
it's
come
real,
from Krishna, but it is temporary. So therefore, it is considered illusory, but illusory from the perspective that it's not lasting and real. It's temporary.
Yes. Yeah.
So we want that which is eternal and lasting, which is of the nature of the soul.
Yeah.
And
yes, that's what I was going to say.
When I get fired up, man, I gotta go. I gotta say what I gotta say. You done?
Yes.
Because in the Bhagavad Gita, it explains that this external energy is Krishna's energy, but it is his
temporary.
No.
Well, I mean,
inferior energy.
Yeah,
higher and lower. I don't know what higher is, but inferior is lower.
All right.
I'll read the next paragraph, shall I?
Please do.
The philosophy that the Absolute is true and this creation is false, Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya, is not accepted by Vaishnava philosophers. The example is given that although all that glitters is not gold, that does mean that a glittering object is false. Nice example. For example, an oyster shell appears to be golden. This appearance of golden hue is due only to the perception of the eyes, but that does not mean that the oyster shell is false. Similarly, by seeing the form of Lord Krishna, one cannot understand what he actually is, but this does not mean that he is false. The form of Krishna has to be understood as it is described in the books of knowledge such as Brahma Samhita. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchit Ananda Vigraha. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has an eternal blissful spiritual body. By our imperfect sense perception, we cannot understand the form of the Lord. We have to acquire knowledge about him. Therefore it is said here, Jnanam Ekam. Bhagavad Gita confirms that they are fools who simply upon seeing Krishna consider him a common man. They do not know the unlimited knowledge, power, and opulence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Material sense speculation leads to the conclusion that the Supreme is formless. It is because of such mental speculation that the conditioned soul remains in ignorance and under the spell of illusory energy. The Supreme Person has to be understood by the transcendental sound vibrated by him in Bhagavad Gita, wherein he says that there is nothing superior to himself. The impersonal Brahman effulgence is resting on his personality. Brahma, can't remember now. The purified absolute vision of the Bhagavad Gita is compared to the river Ganges. Ganges water is so pure that it can purify even the asses and cows. But anyone who disregarding the pure Ganges wishes to be purified instead by the filthy water flowing in a drain, they cannot be successful. Similarly, one can successfully attain pure knowledge of the Absolute only by hearing from the pure Absolute. Whoops! Lord, that was not an earthquake. That was just me kicking the tripod. Similarly, one can successfully attain pure knowledge of the Absolute only by hearing from the pure Absolute himself. Anyway, nice points. Somehow, is of course, a lot about the Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya, and that Krishna is Ishwara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha. And but somehow what stood out to me is once we started talking about the Ganges, and I was thinking, when we go to Mayapur, we're going to be near the Ganga. So exciting. So anyway, next paragraph, please.
In this verse, it is clearly said that those who are averse to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, excuse me, speculate with their imperfect senses about the nature of the absolute truth. The formless Brahman conception, however, can be received only by oral reception and not by personal experience. Knowledge is therefore acquired by oral reception. It is confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra. Sastra Yonivat. One has to acquire pure knowledge from the authorized scriptures. So-called speculative arguments about the absolute truth are therefore useless. The actual identity of the living entity is his consciousness, which is always present while the living entity is awake, dreaming, or in deep sleep. Even in deep sleep, he can perceive by consciousness whether he is happy or distressed. Thus, when consciousness is displayed through the medium of the subtle and gross material bodies, it is covered. But when the consciousness is purified in Krishna consciousness, one becomes free from the entanglement of repeated birth and death. It's an interesting point that the consciousness of which is the actual identity of the living entity is its consciousness, and basically therefore it's explaining that the spirit soul is always awake even when asleep.
Even when the physical body is asleep.
Well, I was getting to that point, dude. God. Yes, even when the physical body is asleep, that we, the spirit soul, are still awake. It's quite a powerful point to meditate on, actually. There's still life or a wakefulness, consciousness. And it's just because we have to succumb to the degree that we're entangled and conditioned to the material energy, the body, that it needs to have lights out for a bit. Because just like a car, when you sit in it, we may remain awake for 10 hours of a road trip, but the car eventually is going to say, no, you got to stop now. You got to stop. It's going to run out of fuel. You got to stop. So in the same way, the material body is going to run out of fuel, which is its energy, and it says you got to stop. But we as a living entity are like, oh man, I could have gone on. All right, let's just park up here, like that.
Okay, interesting analogy. Yeah, so even in deep sleep, he can perceive by consciousness whether he is happy or distressed. So it's interesting. So even in the deepest state of sleep, then the living entity is still perceiving, still experiencing. Yeah, there's a lot to do. Consciousness is a very deep topic matter, actually. Mm-hmm. I'll read the last paragraph, because it was quite a long purport. So, when uncontaminated pure knowledge is uncovered from the modes of material nature, the actual identity of the living entity is discovered. Okay. When uncontaminated pure knowledge is uncovered from the modes of material nature, the actual identity of the living entity is discovered. He is eternally a servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The process of uncovering is like this. The rays of sunshine are luminous, and the sun itself is also luminous. In the presence of the sun, the rays illuminate just like the sun, but when the sunshine is covered by the spell of a cloud or by Maya, then darkness, the imperfection of perception, begins. Imperfection of perception. That's interesting. Therefore, to get out of the entanglement of the spell of nescience, one has to awaken his spiritual consciousness or Krishna consciousness in terms of the authorized scriptures. So yes, a nice analogy of the sun, which you probably heard before. So, when the sun is uncovered, then you get the sun rays, but when the sun is covered by a cloud, it's like being covered by Maya. So the nature of the spirit soul is that it is luminous. It's full of light, and it's full of knowledge, full of life, but covered by the illusory energy, it goes to sleep. It may appear even dead. The body may be dead, but the soul itself is still alive. So like that, the sun is always there, but the covering of the illusory energy of the clouds make it seem like it's not. But yeah, like that. Interesting. Okay, so maybe we should stop there.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you all very much. Stay tuned. Exciting times to come. So yeah, keep watching Bhagavatam Bites as we go for a little adventure. Where was the last adventure? I guess last adventure was America.
Yeah.
Last year. We haven't really been away since then, right?
Yeah.
I guess little bits and pieces. Okay. Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna.
Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.